The Philippines committed 100,000 US dollars or approximately 5 million pesos to help provide necessary humanitarian aid to the people of Ukraine.
As the conflict in Ukraine worsens, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte signs an executive order institutionalizing protection services for refugees.
Philippines really support our territorial integrity and sovereignty, and we're very thankful for this.
What would you do if everything you knew, your house, your job, your friends, your whole life, was torn apart in a single night? What if war came knocking while you were asleep, and every lifeline you reached for offered nothing but silence? That's been the brutal truth for millions of Ukrainians since February 2022. When Russia launched its invasion, peace collapsed and entire cities were thrown into chaos. Kids huddled in dark basements, moms packed bags not knowing where they were going, only that they had to leave. The elderly clung to fading photographs, wondering if they'd ever hold their children again. The world watched. Some offered help. A few opened their doors. But over time, one by one, those doors began to shut. Immigration quotas hit their limits. Public sympathy started to fade. Quietly, signs of welcome were taken down. Then, in an unexpected corner of Southeast Asia, something quietly powerful began to glow. It didn't come from a wealthy European power or a nation with global sway. It didn't come from somewhere with a big political agenda in the war. It came from the Philippines, a country more known for its tropical islands and pageant queens than international diplomacy. And when hesitation echoed around the world, the Philippines responded with clarity. No press conference pyrotechnics, no need to weigh political pros and cons. Justice Secretary Manardo Guevara stood up, calm and steady, and said, "If needed, we will open our doors." No drama, no back and forth, just pure, deliberate humanity. But to really grasp what that moment meant, you have to look at what the Philippines was offering. This wasn't some symbolic gesture or temporary band-aid. This was about shelter, safety, a chance to breathe again. Families fleeing war weren't going to be treated like a burden. They were going to be embraced, given housing, protected under the law, given access to schools, doctors, and daily life. And perhaps the most important gift of all, a place to belong. This wasn't the first time the Philippines had extended a hand to those the world forgot. In fact, this decision was part of a legacy that has quietly repeated itself across generations. This story didn't begin in 2022. It started way back, long before Kyiv was under siege or Mariupol's skyline went dark. You have to rewind to 1939, a time when the world was once again unraveling in real time. Europe was collapsing under Hitler's rise. The Nazis were rounding up millions of Jews. And though the world knew, it turned its face. Powerful countries turned away. The United States capped its immigration numbers. Canada claimed it had no space. Australia said the economy couldn't handle it. One by one, the doors slammed shut. Papers were denied. Hope was extinguished. But in a far-off Southeast Asian archipelago still under American rule, something truly extraordinary happened. President Manuel L. Quezon of the Philippines made a choice that would ripple through time. He wasn't a man with great power or deep pockets, but he had something that couldn't be bought: conviction. "We may be poor," Quezon said, "but we are not heartless." He put policies into motion. He fast-tracked immigration. He even secured land himself for those running from genocide. And through a quiet but fierce operation that stood in defiance of apathy, over 1,300 Jewish refugees found safety in Manila. But they didn't find just safety, they found a future. They built lives, they started families, they planted roots, and they never forgot. Even now, generations later, their descendants return to the Philippines to pay tribute to a country that chose courage over comfort. That decision, drowned out in the noise of global politics, didn't only save lives, it embedded something deep into the Filipino spirit, a belief that kindness isn't something reserved for the powerful, it's a human responsibility. And that belief didn't fade with time. It reignited when the world looked away from another sea of desperate faces. In 1975, after the fall of Saigon, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese scrambled for safety. They poured into the ocean on boats, fragile vessels, no GPS, no guide, nothing but desperation and hope. Many didn't make it. Some were swallowed by storms, others attacked by pirates. Some simply vanished, their stories ending in silence. Those who did survive reached unfamiliar shores and more closed doors. But then, they arrived at the Philippine coastline. And once again, this nation, without headline coverage or global fanfare, did something remarkable.
It opened its arms, all of them. The Philippines created a place called the Philippine Refugee Processing Center in Bataan. Not just a shelter, but a place to heal. Refugees were taught how to speak again, how to work, how to learn. Their children went to school. They were given more than 10 cent food. They were given a second shot at living. And many stayed. They built homes. They fell in love. They raised bilingual children who still carry stories of both Vietnam and the Philippines. And just like those who came before, they remember. Every year, former Vietnamese refugees return, not because they have to, but because they want to say thank you. So when Ukraine found itself burning, when missiles lit up the sky and families scattered, the Philippines wasn't reacting. It was remembering. Remembering a promise made generations ago. When the rest of the world looks away, we won't. In 2022, while other nations gave statements, the Philippines gave visas. While others analyzed data, the Philippines built lifelines. And while global leaders debated at podiums, the Filipino people opened their neighborhoods. And let's be clear, it wasn't driven by politicians alone, far from it. The real pulse came from regular people, from families in small homes offering space at the table, from teachers treating Ukrainian kids like part of the class, from market vendors slipping extra rice into someone's hand and whispering, "Welcome." This wasn't strategy, it wasn't policy, it was instinct. A national muscle memory rooted in empathy. In the Philippines, no one asks where you're from before offering you food. They ask if you're hungry. Because here, bayanihan, the spirit of lifting each other up, runs in the blood. It's not a special occasion, it's everyday life. It's what they did in 1939, in 1975, and again, now. For Filipinos, when tragedy knocks, you pull up another chair, you make more room, and you pass the plate. And what makes this even more powerful is that the Philippines is no stranger to struggle. Poverty exists, infrastructure needs help, resources are often stretched beyond their limit. But that's the point. Compassion isn't something they offer because it's convenient, it's something they offer because it matters. Because to be Filipino isn't to wait for the perfect time to do good, it's to lead with the heart every time. Even when the world forgets, especially then. Ukrainian refugees living in the Philippines today aren't hidden away behind fences or stuck in endless paperwork. They're in neighborhoods, going to schools, getting checkups at local clinics, and most importantly, they're being seen and treated like people. The support they found here doesn't come from chance. It's been built. A partnership between the government, grassroots volunteers, local nonprofits, and international allies like the UNHCR and IOM have created a system that rivals anything you'd expect in wealthier nations. Language classes, mental health counseling, job training, legal help, it's all here. And behind it all are Filipinos offering more than services. They're offering friendship. Take Katerina, a Ukrainian mother who landed in Manila with her daughter and a single backpack. She summed up her journey in one sentence. "I didn't know anything about the Philippines before. Now I know it's home." Her daughter now speaks basic Tagalog and laughs with classmates who never once made her feel different. Katerina, once a civil engineer in Odessa, is now applying to teach math at a local tech college. In under 2 years, she went from displaced to deeply rooted. Not because of luck, but because the Philippines carved out a place for her to grow. And that future didn't grow out of warm feelings alone, it grew from the law. The Philippines is the only country in Southeast Asia to ratify all 3 core treaties that protect refugee rights. That means people here don't just survive, they're protected. They're given legal status, a path to citizenship, access to services that make real life possible. This isn't charity, it's structure. It's a clear message carved into policy. You matter, not as a refugee, as a human being. Then in June 2024, something extraordinary happened. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky landed in Manila for what was described as a quiet diplomatic stop. But what unfolded made history. Standing before the Philippine Congress, with cameras flashing and Filipino leaders beside him, Zelensky spoke words that stopped the room. We never imagined that a country so far away, with no reason to help us, would be among the first to step up. But the Philippines didn't ask what we could offer. They simply chose to act. He paused, emotion thick in his throat, and then made an announcement no one expected. Ukraine would open its first ever embassy in the Philippines. Not for trade, not for strategy, but for something deeper: gratitude. Because when the world stood still, the Philippines moved. From Kiev to Cebu, people took notice. Ukrainian news outlets ran stories about Filipino kindness. Images of the Philippine flag with the words "Thank you" in Ukrainian flooded social media. And back in Ukraine, citizens began organizing something remarkable: donation drives for the Philippines. Boxes of aid, clothes, school supplies, and handwritten letters poured in across oceans, heading toward the nation that had given so much without ever asking for anything back. It's easy to get buried in statistics: 6 million here, 8,000 there. But this story, it's not about numbers. It's about names, faces, choices made in quiet rooms far from headlines. And the choice the Philippines keeps making over and over is both bold and beautifully simple. When someone knocks, you open the door. That might not sound like a revolution, but in today's world, it is. Because compassion takes courage. It's not clean or easy. It asks you to stretch, to risk, to trust. But within that risk lies the most powerful part of being human. And the Philippines, again and again, chooses that. Not for credit, but because it's who they are. Storytelling is part of Filipino culture. And this story has sunk deep into the soul of the nation. From elders who remember the Vietnamese camps in Bataan, to young kids today who sit next to Ukrainian classmates and ask what snow feels like. These moments aren't history, they're identity. They show up in textbooks, in murals, in whispered bedtime stories. This isn't foreign policy, this is family. And if there's one lesson in all this, it's not that the Philippines is flawless, it's that you don't need to be flawless to do good. You don't need to be rich or powerful or famous to show up for someone else. You just need to care enough to act. The Philippines has shown us what that looks like, not once, but time and time again. Not for applause, not for gain, but because deep in its national heart beats the belief that when people are in pain, you help. Full stop. So here we are, a nation with a history shaped by struggle, now becoming a symbol of radical empathy in a divided world. At a time when politics feel like theater and compassion feels rare, the Philippines reminds us what really matters. That no one should face suffering alone. That no one should be left outside when help is possible. That when we lead with heart, borders fade and something sacred remains. Where it goes from here, that's up to us. Because stories like this aren't meant to sit in silence. They're meant to echo across countries, timelines, languages. So when someone tells you the world is broken, tell them this: the Philippines doesn't have missiles or massive wealth, but it stood up, opened its arms, and redefined what courage looks like. If this story struck a chord with you, share it. Not for clicks, but for clarity. Like this video, subscribe if you believe stories like this deserve a bigger stage, and drop a comment below. What could the world look like if more nations led with heart over calculation? Because while others build walls, the Philippines builds bridges, and that changes everything.